everyone. My name is Alina and I am Canvas and Conversation, and today we're going to do our Snowy Gnomes painting. So if you have all your supplies ready, your brushes, your paint, paper towel to dry your brushes up, because this one does involve a little bit of back and forth between brushes and colors. The other thing I'm going to recommend for this painting, especially if you're doing it at home, is to have a hair dryer handy so we can kind of quickly dry this up and keep moving. Otherwise, just give it a few minutes because it's acrylic paint. It will dry fairly quickly for that, so you can your colors don't get muddy and mix too much. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I've got my big brush and I've got my paint on my palette here on my paper plate, and I'm going to start with this dark blue with a little bit of black. And I know I always say a little bit of black goes a long way, but you just kind of want this real nice dark midnight blue. And I'm going to start up here at the top right hand corner, and I'm going to come down maybe about 2 inches, and I'm going to create, I know there's a method to the madness here, so you'll see I'm doing my top edge, because I always caution everybody to do your edges so that when it hangs on your wall, you have a nice edge and nobody points it out to you and says, hey man, you missed a spot. So I'm going to start in this upper right hand corner, and I'm going to work my way across. And it doesn't have to be straight. It can be kind of like a horizon line, and it's just this real dark kind of midnight blue color that I mix in a little bit of black and a dark blue. I'm going to go all the way across here. Now, as with the other paintings, you want to make sure that you cover the canvas. You don't want canvas peeking through. So I always smooth it out, but you don't want to have big globs of paint, especially with this one, because you want to make sure that your canvas is drying and enough time to move on to the next step. So I want to cover the canvas but not have big globs of paint. Remember, it is acrylic paint. Will wash off your hands, out of your hair, but if you get it on your clothes, you might be living with it. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so now I've got this 2 to 3 inches, kind of my horizon line here. Now I'm going to flip my canvas the other direction. Now if you're laying flat, you don't have to have it upside down to start, but if you're working on an easel, you might want to do that. Now, from there, I'm not going to rinse my brush. I've got this nice kind of dark blue on there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up some white paint. And I'm even kind of brushing it on the side of my palette here. And that's going to give me a blue. And I'm going to look at my canvas, and I've got 3 gnomes here, and I want to kind of outline where these gnomes are going to be and where my hats are going to be. And if you want tall pointy hats, or if you want toboggans, more of a sock hat, and you just think about that a little bit, how you want your hats. And I have 3 of them, so I want to space them evenly. So I'm just going to rough in very lightly, a little bit of paint on my brush, kind of where the outline of these hats would be, and they're just kind of triangles, bumpy triangles, right? So there's one. I'm going to put another one. Because my middle one's going to be more of a sock hat, he's a little smaller. And then this one over here, maybe a little more pointed. And you can always change the shape of these a little bit when we get to that. So those are my hats, and then my nose are kind of these big parenthesis shapes, right? You have these big parenthesis shapes. You can have tall, skinny gnomes. You can have big, fluffy gnomes. But that's basically my shape. And if you kind of look at them, they kind of look like snowman shape at this point. But just so I know roughly where they're going to be. Then I'm going to add, again, some white. And I've not rinsed my brush yet. I'm using whatever's blue is left in my brush. And I'm going to start right here, and we're going to add white. and let our brush mix this kind of light blue. And I'm going to go right up to these gnomes, so I don't really have a hard line there. And I want to work in smaller sections, so I'm going to keep just adding white and blue. And I'm going to work on both sides. And again, you'll notice that it doesn't have to be one specific color. I'm just letting my brush mix that color. And then I'm going to pick up more white. So as I go up my canvas, it's going to get a little lighter, and a little lighter, and a little lighter. And if you have some in your brush that makes it a little darker in areas, that's okay. I'm just kind of really blending that and mixing it, leaving that there. We're thinking of a snowy white day. So I haven't picked up any extra blue. I'm just picking up extra white and adding that in as I go across my canvas. And I'm trying to keep it fairly even on both sides. Again, just picking up white. And going right up to the edges of my gnomes. This is a fun little, I know it's not quite winter yet. Today it kind of feels that way. We've got some rain and cold out, but it's not quite snowy yet. Again, just picking up more and more white as you come up to the top. Now when you get in between here, now don't forget in between your little gnomes. Again, you can go right up to the edges. We want to make sure that gets filled in as well. I don't really have a hard edge around them. Again, it's a suggestion. And you'll notice how I'm doing my edges on the sides as I come to them as well. So don't forget those side edges. And now that I'm up at the top, I'm just picking up white. You'll notice that I've still got this light blue all the way across there. And all I've done is pick up white. I want to get rid of that line there, so I'm going to blend that down a little bit. I'm going to go across the top. Blend that in a little bit there. So really work your background, get it the way you want it. Remember, it's just a snowy day, but you don't really want these hard transition lines. You just want to blend those in. Alright. Got that right up to my edges here. Now, I'm going to put this big brush in my cup of water and leave it there until I'm ready to clean up brushes later. And right now, I'm going to pick up my hairdryer and I'm going to dry this up because I want to start immediately on my toboggans or my sock hats, and that's the quickest way to do it. So we're just going to dry this up here. it is dry. It doesn't take it a lot. I'm going to find my medium-sized brush. And I'm going to dry it up. Mine's already in water, so I'm going to dry that up. And I'm going to start on my sock hats here, my toboggans. And I want them to be this really dark red and a dark gray. So I'm going to start with my red. And I'm going to add a teeny, teeny, tiny bit, I mean a teeny, tiny quarter bit of black to that. Because a little black goes a very long way with this. So you just want a dark red. Now, if you want other colors and you have other colors available, by all means, make this your own. And I'm just going to go through it. Now I'm going to go over top where my little outline was, because you're still going to see that little outline, but that blue underneath of there is going to give us a nice shadow and darkness. So I'm just going to, now you'll notice I kind of did little brush strokes, but if you do one big smooth stroke, then you get a smoother outline. So just keep that in mind. And I'm going to come down. See, this gnome is probably, the top of the hat is probably about right here. This one's got a big hat. So go ahead and add that in so I know how far down I'm going to go. And again, one smooth stroke will give you a nice smooth line there. And you just, I mix paint as I go. Again, I don't mix one particular color. It's just the way I paint. If you want one specific color, then by all means, do which one do. This one's a little bumpy. So I've got my little bumpy gnome here. And you'll notice I'm just outlining this to start with. And so if my paint's really dark, like I got a little much black in it, then that becomes towards the outside. And then I'm just going to fill this in right now. And again, I want to smooth it out. And then the next time, I'm just going to pick up some red and and put that in there. So I've got this darker towards the edges, and then just red here in the middle. And I'm going to let that sit just a minute while I do my other one. This one, probably more so than any of the other paintings we've done, has a little more detail in it. So I'm going to use that same red, dark red that I've mixed. And I'm going to go over here to my other hat. And again, depending on how you want your hats, if you want them more pointed. And I'm just going to go right up to where I had outlined that with blue before, because I don't want to have like a blue line around it. And I want that blue to create a shadow underneath my red. And then here's my bottom. There's where his face is going to be. You want these to go down. And I'm going to fill this one in. And now I'm going to rinse my brush again. I'm still using that medium brush. I'm going to dry it up on my paper towel. We want to make sure that we're not using super wet brushes here. And I'm going to make a real dark charcoal gray, and that's just black and white together. More black than white in this case. And I'm just using the edge of my palette here, the edge of my plate, because it doesn't take a lot of paint to do that. And I'm going to put my middle one in here. going to go right up to the edge of my red. I'm going to put where his comes in. And I'm going to fill that in. You notice I left a little top there. We'll come back and get that in a bit. So I'm just going to fill this in. Now you notice as I'm filling this one in, I'm kind of doing it in layers. Like he's got this little top layer, and he's got the next little layer, and then he's got like this bottom layer. Alright, now while I have this dark gray on my brush, I'm actually just going to pick up some black. And we're going to come down here and do his shoes, or do their shoes. So they're just these little oval shapes that go over top a little bit of the blue and the white. So add these in. And I'm just using black. I know I had gray on my brush, so it's okay to do that. So you have a little dark gray there. Put their little feet in. Their shoes. These are kind of oval shapes. They're not perfect circles. Kind of flat on the bottom. Now that I've got this dark brown, dark gray, black, it's still in my brush, I'm going to brush it off on the side of my palette so there's just a little bit of paint on there. And I'm going to come back and add in some darkness, some shading into my hats. So I'm going to come in, and this is a little darker here. Well, I'm going to do this one first over here because it's a little drier. It's still a little wet, so I'm just going to add a little bit in there so you can see where that is, and some around the edges and down in my corners. This is not something we do a lot in these kind of paintings because these are meant to be kind of quick and fun, but I feel like this one needs a little extra love. I'm going to add a little darkness around that, around the edges. And that's going to blend with that red, get you a really nice dark shadowy red there. And again, I'm doing it where the folds would be and kind of around the edges. Not all the edges. It's not an outline. It's just a touch of darkness. So we are adding the black, a little bit of black darkness to our hats. And again, I'm just adding here and there where I think those folds would be to give it some more definition. Right over top. And I'm using very little paint, and I'm really kind of blending that in as much as I can around the edges. And I'm doing them in the same order that I painted them so that they're a little drier. They're still tacky, but they're not super wet. Add that there, and then I'm going to come back with some really dark black to add this one in so that it pops up around around here and around where they meet, of course, so they're a little darker around the edges. And if yours doesn't look like mine or you've changed the shapes, it's okay. I mean, mine doesn't even look like mine. It has, you know, there's no way to do it the same way twice, so don't worry about that. Just enjoy what you're doing. Alright, so I've added my darkness. That one's a little weird right there. I've got to fix that a little bit. Okay. And add a little dark around their edge. Now I'm going to go ahead while I get this black on my brush. I'm going to do just a little bit of dark in between here. You'll notice I'm just barely touching the canvas. This is where my gnomes come together and where their beards are going to come together. But here in a minute we're going to come back with other paint over top of that. But I want to have this kind of shadow in between them to begin with. So I'm going to add that in first. Alright, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rinse my brush again and get a lot of that, as much of that black out of it as you can. Just kind of scrub it on the bottom of your cup, or in my case a jar, and dry that up on your paper towel. Now I'm going to use a little bit of brown and a lot of white, and that's going to make my tan color for the face. And I mean, it's a tiny bit of brown. That's all you need. I'm going to go in and I'm going to do this kind of oval shape. I'm going to go right up to the edge of my hats and do kind of this oval shape for their faces. It almost looks like a nose. It could be a nose. If you decide you don't want a face and you just want noses, you can just have it as the nose. This is my face, little oval shapes there. And go right up to my hat. Alright, now I'm going to rinse my brush again. Lots of rinsing today. And then I'm just going to come back with white. And I know it's going to be hard to see white on white, but I'm going to add a teeny tiny bit of black on my brush. I just picked up a little bit on my palette, and I'm going to start down here so I have some gray. And we're going to start with the beards. And basically you want to kind of come out and around so your brush strokes are overlapping your blue. They're coming right up to your hat, and they're going to fill in. So it's like a very light gray, little bit of black in there so that you can see. If you pick up a little black off of your shoes, that's okay. It's probably dry by now. And I'm working kind of from the center out, adding a little black when I need it. And it's just white, and that brush stroke is what is making your beards. You can make sure that you are keep it pretty sharp up here around your hat. And we're just going to fill in our beards with white. And kind of like we did with the blue, where I had the gray at the bottom and then I'm just adding more and more white towards the top here. And then I'm going to fill in my other ones. I'm going to go ahead and do my middle one. You can work your way across. You can do one or the other. You can start with your middle one if you want. Again, a little bit more of that black towards the bottom and your sides. You can even do it this way so that they both have some hair here. All their beards intermingle. So it's okay to work on all of them at one time if you have that color on your brush. And then just come back with some white. And fill in your beards. Keeping it as smooth as I can up around the hat. I'm not really worried up around the nose, but I want to keep it pretty smooth up around the hat. We want to overlap our shoes. And you also want to overlap where the blue comes up. We don't want to have a hard edge there. Alright, and while I've got this white on my brush, and this little bit of gray, I'm going to add little tufts up here for my snowball. You might have to add a little bit of black so you see it. I mean a little, I got too much. Just kind of dab it there and then fluff it out. And then while you still have this on your brush as well, you can add some snow down here on the bottom. I'm just barely touching my brush to the canvas. Like that, I'm going to add just a little bit here so they have a snowy ground that they're on. Alright, now I am going to take my hair dryer again and I'm going to dry this up. You notice I focus mostly on their beards because we got to put their noses in. If you're not going to use the pen for the nose and you're going to use a red nose, we need to dry that up. So I'm going to come back, rinsed my brush again, dried it up on my paper towel. I'm going to use that same dark red that I used for my hats for noses. We want to be careful that we don't get too much white in it. That's why we dried it up. And we're just going to go and make our oval nose here. It can be a button nose. I'm using an oval nose. And put our noses in. So I put those in, and now I'm going to use that same red for my mittens, and I've matched my mittens to my hats. Again, you can do that. Your mittens are kind of, well, it's a mitten shape, so it's an oval with a little thumb on it, but I'm just going to do the little ovals. Little mitten shape here. And I'm still using my medium brush for most of this painting. Do that. And then I'm going to rinse my brush. I'm going to put in my other mitten here, my gray ones. Again, just the same dark gray that you used. And I'm going to try to get these close enough together so that he's holding a little present. Now, if you don't want your gnomes to hold anything, that's okay. So there they go. There I have my little mittens. Try to clean that up just a little bit. It's hard to do it sideways. And then I'm going to put that brush in my cup of water and leave it. And I'm going to find my baby brush. So we have a baby brush, and I'm going to start adding in my little details because that's what's left. So I'm going to start with my, what am I going to start with, right? I'm going to start with my white. So I have my baby brush, my white. I'm going to add in, I'm going to start on my hats, and this hat has stripes. Again, you can do however you like, however you want your hats to be. And I'm just lightly adding in some stripes, my hat. And when I'm doing these, I'm really kind of loading my brush up with paint. I'm just following where I think my hat would have some lines. And how that would fold. There's no right or wrong way with this. And then I'm going to add a little bit of white in on this one where those creases would be. A little bit right here and around the edges so that it feels like it's got some roundness to it, and on the top. So there's his little toboggan. This one has some polka dots. Again, you can do these however you like. They don't have to be like mine. Just remember that your polka dots might peek in a fold somewhere. They don't have to be full on. And it doesn't take a lot of paint, just a little. And then while I have this on here, I'm going to add just a little on his shoes, a little highlight there. And a little highlight on his nose, or on their nose, I should say. And then I'm going to rinse my brush. And I'm going to put in a little box here for a present. And so he's holding a present. Again, be careful going around your mitten. That's why we're using the baby brush. Box on the present here. And then I'm going to rinse my brush again. I'm going to let that dry just a minute. I'm going to come back with some black and give him a little bit of eyes. Little eyes, little sad eyes, sleepy eyes. And then I'm going to brush that off just a little bit, so I have just a little bit of black paint on my baby brush, and I'm going to use that to give me a little darkness in my nose too. This around my noses with my baby brush, very little paint, just barely touching it, just really kind of blending that in, just a little, so it's a little dark around his nose, and on his mittens, just a little. And but his mittens have a little darkness too. So they have a little shadow around your edges. And then I'm going to add a little bow to my box. So to do that, again, my baby brush. Add a little bow here. Bow and ribbon. They don't have to be holding anything. They can have a little lantern, whatever you want them to hold. I'm going to come back with a little bit of red, that real dark red, my baby brush, and give them some thumbs. Gnomes have thumbs? I don't know. Mine do. They're going to have some thumbs. And their mittens. And again, with this one, the black, give them some thumbs. And then, we're almost done. Then I'm going to rinse my brush again, and I'm going to come back to my white paint, and I'm going to add some snow. And I'm just using my baby brush. That's what happens when you don't get your brush completely dry. You get water drops. And I'm just going to use my baby brush and add some random snow. Be careful not to put your snow on a grid. You can even have some snow on their hats. And I'm just barely, just dotting the canvas. And then I'm going to add a teeny tiny bit of white in their eyes, just so they twinkle. And we have snowy gnomes. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope yours turns out spectacular, and have a good holiday season. Thanks.